Scots Nation, welcome back to another episode of Tartan Talk. This week's guest is Jay Malone, a J.D. Davis Award recipient in 1991 and member of the Wall of Fame class of 2024. He was a 4-year letterman and 3-year starter for the Scots, earning D3 South Region recognition for his performance as a senior. Following his graduation from Maryville, Malone has been a physical education teacher and head football coach at Maryville Junior High School, where he is also the head track and field coach. His football teams have posted an .830 winning percentage and have won 12 East Tennessee Middle School Football Conference Championships. Please help me in welcoming Jay Malone. All right, welcome back to another episode of Tartan Talk. Our guest today is Jay Malone. Jay was a football player here for 4 years and a student coach his 5th year. Jay, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Since I left Maryville College, which was in '92, I was very blessed to get a job at Maryville Junior High School, and been there for 33 years. And so basically went across the street and got a job, fortunately, and it was one of those things that they hired me to teach health and PE, and then I've been the head football coach and track coach now I've been there 33 and I've been the head guy for 20-something. It's hard to keep up. I guess 23, 24 is the head coach. So,
can you take us through your career on the field? The Scots pretty much, they got better every year that you played. So can you walk us through that and what that looked like?
Yeah. When I came in, the head coach was Larry Stevens. Excuse me. And Larry Stevens, when I came in '87, that year we finished like 1-9. And I'm going to be very honest, I was really considering transferring to Carson Newman because they had recruited me, and I was actually going to transfer to Carson Newman that summer. And that was my plan until Phil Wilkes arrived in the spring. And when I met Coach Wilkes, I was like, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so that very first year, he took us out of the ODAC. We were in the ODAC my freshman year, the ODAC, Old Dominion Athletic Conference. And so he wanted to cut down on the traveling, and so we were independent. And so we weren't able to get 10 games. We only had 9 games. But we went 2-7, whereas the year before was 1-9. So then my junior year, he doubled the wins again. We went 4-6. He got a 10-game schedule. Now with that meant we sometimes had to play some scholarship programs because since we weren't in a conference, he was scratching and clawing to get games. And so I can remember one of my most memorable, unique games. We played Samford University. And we went to Samford University. Of course, they were a scholarship program. Their head coach was Terry Bowden, the son of Bobby Bowden. In my freshman year, I was a defensive back. And this guy, you'll recognize his name, Jimbo Fisher, was the starting quarterback for Samford University. So I had to defend his passes that game. But thankfully, he didn't smoke me deep. But at any rate, we kept, the wins continued to double. So then my junior year, like I say, we were 4-6. My senior year, we were 5-5, and other than Emory and Henry, we were in every game. Sadly, last game of my senior year, Emory and Henry smoked us at Emory and Henry. We won't repeat that score, but I'll never forget that game because it was just a mud fest. So I take pride that I got to be a part of Coach Wilkes' first years, and success improved each year. After my senior year, I knew I wanted to go into coaching. I still had to do my student teaching, and so Coach Wilkes asked me to stay on, and I was a grad assistant, volunteer assistant, and that year we went 7-3. So, Coach Wilkes had the program going in the right direction. I'm thankful I got to be a part of that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that 5th year and transitioning into the coaching role?
Yeah, it was very unique because I literally got to be a lot of hands-on because the actual defensive backs coach, he was a full-time Blount County school teacher. And so he couldn't get here till after we'd been in practice each day for like 30 to 45 minutes. And so Coach Wilkes assigned me to Mike White Sr., not junior. Mike White II is at Maryville High School, but his dad was here coaching. And so I was having to lead drills and do a lot of different things with guys that I had just played with. And so I'll have to admit that was pretty unique, somewhat coaching the guys that I was, some of them just a year older. So, but it was still a great experience. They knew that I, was doing what I wanted to do, and I didn't overstep my boundaries and try to talk down to them. I still felt like I was one of them.
So, funny enough, when you got here, you told us about how our setting right here, which is the classroom in the Cooper Athletic Center where our football team meets and has defensive meetings right before practice. You used to have PE classes in here. Can you tell
Correct.
us about those classes and just, I guess, overall your Maryville College class experience?
Yeah, the very room we're sitting in, of course, I've still got it memorized, 162A. Probably almost half of my classes were in this room since I was a health and PE major. And so Dr. John Perry, who is over the PE department, he led the majority of those classes in here. But what's also kind of interesting to me, of course, the orange and the garnet room were racquetball courts when I went to school here. So this is where we broke up into offensive meetings, and I can remember watching watching film in here when we would have our meetings, and more than once I almost fell asleep because no windows in this room, it'd get pretty dark. And so yeah, I've got great memories in here with both academics, and football as well.
How did those PE classes help you in your career now as a health and wellness teacher at Maryville Junior High School?
The classes themselves, I must say, what I really learned more in the classes were the experiences from Dr. Perry. Of course, we can all read a book, and now people can go online and research anything, but still, he was very hands-on. He cared about each of us. He knew us inside and out. He knew every kid, if they were an athlete, what they played, what position they played. He would ask you about your games. We did, believe it or not, even in college, he would take us on experiential field trips that had to do with whatever we were studying. Sometimes he might bring in guest speakers. But I must say, where I really got immersed as a health and PE teacher was my student teaching. And so, because then you're just thrown in there. And, I can remember when I did my student teaching at Maryville High School, Suzanne Singleton, day 2 or 3, she said, "They're yours." And she told me what we were doing, and I started teaching. But the other half of my student teaching was also by an alumnus, Glenn Doig, who retired from Sam Houston Elementary, but played baseball here in the 70s. And so I had part of my student teaching with also a former Scot. And so he took me under his wing and was really good to, mentor me.
If I could go off of that, you're talking about former Scots mentoring Scots, and you've currently mentoring Tyler Bost, who we had on our podcast just a couple of weeks ago. Could you tell us a little bit about how that relationship's working?
Yeah, it's incredible. Tyler's a self-starter, and so I found that out really quick. He and I first met last spring when he had just come in and just did some visual observations. He wasn't even in the student teaching part of it yet. He would just come in and observe. And so I could tell then that, he was a self-starter, but then over the summer, he had called me or texted me and he said, "Hey," he said, "I'd like for us to meet and get together and tell me what I can do to help you. What can I do for you during summer conditioning of football?" And so he spent part of his summer coming to our conditioning, practices when his were over here. And so he immediately came in hands-on. He took over our stretching, our warm-up that we do before practice. And then in the weight room, because my guys, even in season, out of season, they lift 3 mornings a week before school. And so I have turned over the weight program to Tyler just because, one, he's extremely knowledgeable, and two, that's what he wants to go to grad school for. He wants to be ultimately a strength and conditioning coach. And so he's just doing amazing. I mean, one of the best guys I've ever had, for sure.
All right, so a couple of weeks ago, you were inducted into the Maryville College Wall of Fame. Can you tell us a little about that experience?
Sure. When they first told me that I was going in to the class of 2024, I guess it was this past into the spring, first of the summer, and I must say it was a completely just humbling effect because it's like I've said before. I mean, as far as success goes, I feel like I was just a small part of it. And I've got to thank so many people that mentored me and that coached me and that invested in me, like Coach Wilkes that was here as my head coach. Shannon O'Brien was my position coach, offensive coordinator. I think Dr. John Perry that taught me in so many classes here. Of course, my parents. I mean, I was just a small part of that, but I'm very honored. Because the one thing I do feel I did was I was all in. And if they would have told me to jump, I would have said how high on the way up, And so very thankful, very blessed.
You said that night, you talked about how Maryville College really helped you on your faith journey. Can you touch on that for us?
Yeah, and I give thanks to, again, someone else, Steve Diggs. When I came in here in '87, I was a freshman football player, didn't really know anyone, of course. And we had a senior defensive end by the name of Steve Diggs. And Steve said, "Hey, would you like to come to FCA?" And I'm like, "What's FCA?" I didn't even know what FCA was. And he said, "It's Fellowship of Christian Athletes." And I thought, okay, I'm a Christian, I'm an athlete, let's go. And so, but I'm thankful that he took the time to ask me because part of my testimony is this simple. I tell people, Jesus changed my heart, but FCA changed my life. And it truly did because I had the privilege to be a part of the program here for 5 years. Back then they did presidents and vice presidents. So my junior and senior year, I was the president of FCA, was a leader all 4 years. And then when I went to Maryville Junior High School as a coach and teacher, they didn't have FCA. And so I had the privilege of starting that FCA over 30 years ago. And we meet weekly and probably average 80 to 100 kids every Thursday morning.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like being a coach at the junior high?
Sure. I take pride in knowing that we are truly the only feeder program to Maryville High School. That's why I'm still there. I've had the opportunity to go other places if I wanted to coach high school football. It's one of those deals where I've had many high schools call and say, "Hey, we'd like for you to come interview. We have an opening," whether it was an assistant coach, whether it was the head coach. Coach Iruli, when he was here, he asked me to come over here as an assistant. And I don't say that to boast, it's just I love where I'm at. And some high schools might have 2 or 3 middle schools that feed their high school program. Well, we're it. And I'm very blessed to have some incredible coaches that I love dearly. And like I've said many times, the head coach many times gets too much praise for success. And I've got to give praise to my assistant coaches, my administration, our kids. It's one of those things that I'm thankful to be where I'm at, and that's where I'm going to retire from.
You touched on loving where you're at. Maryville College, it's been a family affair, right?
Right. I had a great aunt that went here in the 60s. So she was our first family member, and then she went on to be a college professor after her Maryville College days. And then I came here in '87, of course graduated. My son came here originally to play football and go to school. And then while he was in football camp, he decided he wanted to become a United States Marine. And I said, okay, but we want you to finish your degree. And so he did join the Corps, but finished his degree. And so he's a graduate. Then my daughter came here after him as a cheerleader. And she was here for probably 2.5 years. And then she met her husband. And so then she ended up moving to Sevierville at the time. And so she ended up finishing her degree at Liberty University. My wife went here a couple of years. So I mean, we've got a lot of connection with this school and a deep sense of pride. And it's like I said at the Wall of Fame banquet, I bleed orange and garnet.
Mm-hmm. Coming back for homecoming with the family every year, what was that like?
Oh, wow. It's one of those things that you see people that you haven't seen. Some of them you see every year. Some of them you haven't seen in 5-10 years or whatever. So some people, it was like, usually people come back years later and they're really out of shape. And there was one guy at homecoming, this a couple of weeks ago. He was in incredible shape to the point that I didn't recognize him. And so I had to ask one of my buddies, I'm like, man, I vaguely remember that guy. Who is it? And then when he told me, I'm like, wow. He went from being a D lineman to now he looks like he was a defensive back because he had just, had changed so much. And so it's just great rekindling those fires, and memories of people that you had. And of course, when my wife and my son, daughter, in-laws, my parents, got to be here, a part of that, it was really special because the last time my parents had been to a game here, or especially been on that field, was senior day. So my senior season, our last game, and so they got to be out on that field. So for them to get to come back, 30-something years later, and be on the field now, as a Wall of Fame inductee, that was really special.
So going back to your time here where the team got better and better every year, and under the recent direction of Coach Fox, the team's seen great success. What do you make of that?
The environment, the culture, the climate that he has brought to the program. And that's not to diminish anyone before him, but obviously what Coach Fox and his staff is doing, I mean, it's working. And the mojo is there. I think obviously, Coach Brummett is an incredible D coordinator that he's got, that he was able to keep, and so his assistants are obviously doing an incredible job because across the board football, they've got success. And I think that obviously these players, I really do. I feel that they know he cares about them. I feel they probably have good connections with their position coaches, because sometimes in college football, some players might not have a connection with the head coach as much as they do their position coach. So I would be shocked that if these players didn't have a connection with somebody. And I know I did when I was here. I was fortunate I had a connection with both the head coach and my position coach. And so I think, that breeds a pride and a commitment among the players that, man, they don't want to let those guys down, but also with each other. And, obviously I know the defense this year, at one time I think they were ranked second in the nation. And I know as of last week, they were still a top team. A top 10 team in the nation defensively. And, that's a brotherhood. Okay, that tells me that those guys, man, they're playing for each other as well. And when you got guys playing for each other, man, that's a hard one to beat. Good luck to the next opponent. I mean, it's hard to compete against that.
So as we end our time here today, I asked you to prepare maybe a couple stories about your favorite moments as a Maryville College Scot. Could you share one of those with us?
Oh man, if I had to pick one, it's pretty simple. Our offensive coordinator, Shannon O'Brien, he was quite a colorful guy, and he had a deep sense of pride in this school because he too was a fighting Scot, and like myself was a wide receiver. And so he was very passionate about what he did, and he was the offensive coordinator. And so he was calling most of the plays. And it was one of those deals where, Coach Wilkes had actually mentioned, to me, that was mentioned at the Wall of Fame that, they could count on me to always make that big third down catch. And what I do take pride in that, when I was playing in the 80s, they weren't slinging the ball around the park as much as they do now. And so offenses were more run dominated. So man, when they did call my number to catch a pass, man, I was excited, because I'm like, all right, man, they're throwing it. But there was this one particular game that I didn't make the catch, like Coach Wilkes said I did. And so as I'm coming off the field, and Coach Wilkes kind of motions me over, and so I thought, oh boy. So he took off his headset. I knew what was coming because OB, as we called him, Shannon O'Brien, as we called him OB, I knew he was on the other end of the headset. So I put the headset on, and here it came. And he's like, so I'll mimic him because he had a high-pitched voice when he was mad, and he was like, Jay Malone, if you don't take off those damn gloves, you'll never play another freaking down this game. And he added a few verbs that I left out. And I was like, yes, sir. I handed the headset back to Coach Wilkes. And I took the gloves off. I never put them back on. And his theory was, he was like, you never practiced in them, and you put them on for this game, and then you drop the ball. And I said, well, Coach, you're correct. My hands were cold, but I'll take them off. And so that was the only reason I was wearing them. But the second part of that story, they say paybacks can be brutal. And so I was a country boy. I'd always grown up hunting and fishing my whole life. Coach OB, but I got to throw this out since he used colorful language. His initials were actually SOB. And it fit because behind closed doors, many times he was referenced that, but they were truly his initials, Shannon O'Brien, SOB. And so I thought, I'm going to get him back. And so he being a city boy, he had never hunted or fished. And he said, hey man, I would love to learn to hunt. I said, you got it. So I took him way out in the country to a family property that we had. And so I was teaching him how to rabbit hunt, squirrel hunt. I said, we'll start out with small game. And so I'd put him in one area. I took another area. He heard the gunshots. And so I come back with my game. And I thought, before he sees me, I'm going to really mess with his mind here. So obviously animals bleed, but I always eat what I hunted. So I had blood, and I put blood under my eyes, just like the eye black that we wore for a game. So I thought, this is going to get him. So I come back, and of course he immediately was looking at that under my eyes, and he's like, well, I see you got one. I said, yeah, I got a few. And I said, hey, you remember a few weeks ago when you chewed me out over the headset? He goes, yeah. I said, I've waited a long time for this day, man. So I'm holding rabbits in one hand, my 12 gauge in the other. I said, OB, I could shoot you and bury you right here on the family property and nobody would ever know it. And so, of course, it was all kidding, but I got him back. And so I put a good scare into him, but I loved him dearly. And he even gave me permission to share that story at the Wall of Fame. He said, you share anything you want. So, but he's a great guy, and he's still coaching. He's like 63, 64 years old now. And he and I talked just 2 or 3 days before the Wall of Fame induction. And he wasn't able to be there that night because he was coaching a game, but he got to come to homecoming, and we got some pictures together. And so those memories are priceless. Those memories, you'll remember those stories many times more than a touchdown or a third down catch or, a tackle or whatever. So it's good stuff.
All right, well, Coach, thank you so much for being here today.
You're very
It's been an
welcome,
honor.
Connor. Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Tartan Talk. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, and on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a future episode. Thank you, and go Scots.